Good morning, everyone. My name is Emmett, and I'm head teacher at Downfield Primary School in Dundee. And when Alison asked me to do the presentation this morning, she casually dropped into the conversation that she needed a couple of experienced head teachers for a brief presentation. And I thought to myself, crumbs, how did I manage to go from rookie head teacher to experienced head teacher quite so quickly? It passes in a flash. It really, really does. And I thought about that and I thought, actually, maybe I am an experienced head teacher. I began my teaching career in 1994 as a primary teacher in Perth and Kinross, upper school teacher. And spent 6 years in the classroom and then went to when there were assistant head roles. That's how old I am. I was an assistant head and then moved on to deputy roles and actually remained at deputy level for quite some time. I was a good kind of 14, 15 years as a deputy. I was really in no hurry to climb the greasy pole to headship. And then the opportunity at Downfield Primary School came up and that's at that point where I made that brave leap. During my time as a deputy, I suppose I worked with two particularly inspiring head teachers who I think people in the room will know, one being Emmett at Creve Primary School, and I'm going to kind of drop into the conversation this morning with you a couple of things that she gifted me, one of which was the gift of really recognising the power of professional reading as a tool to help you as a head teacher, and the other one was Anne-Dale. Anne-Dale ended up being a QIO in Perth and Kinross, and some of the colleagues from Perth and Kinross will know Anne, and something she really taught me was about the power of relationships and that relationship-based leadership approach. So a wee bit about Downfield. Downfield is a large primary school in the area of Kirkton in Dundee, and those of you who are local and probably further afield will remember Kirkton as an area of Dundee hit the news a couple of years ago as being a place that was involved in a lot of social unrest, and there were riots where schools were burnt and cars were destroyed, and there was a lot of social unrest, riot teams brought over from all over Scotland to kind of control things. That's not the picture you can see there, because that also is Kirkton, and those are some of the pupils and some of the learners in my school. And I suppose what I wanted to impress upon you was the context that I work in is exceptionally challenging. And as a brand new head teacher entering that school 8.5 years ago, I really felt that I'd probably bitten off more than I could chew, if I was honest. So what I want to do this morning is just really talk you through my journey and what I did and what I felt was helpful. Some of this might resonate with you, and I hope you can take away some tips, but also there's some information there about some professional reading that I really, when times were hard and I had to dig deep, those were things that got me out some of the holes that I found myself in. So Downfield, large primary school, 60% of the pupils at Downfield are in the most deprived areas of Scotland. And I arrived there as a brand new head teacher on December 2015, bright, bushy-tailed, ready to go. I felt after quite a long time as a middle leader, I was ready. I don't know that Downfield Primary School was ready for me, but I felt like I was ready for it. Perhaps not, and we'll get there in a second. The school profile, 60% SIMD 1 and 2, significant percentage socio-economically disadvantaged families, so a challenging context to begin with. When I arrived, like Andrew, part of what I did was SWOT analysis, looking at kind of the self-evaluation of the school. I met with all the parent council, and I also met with every single employee in the school individually, just to ask them, tell me about the school, tell me what you feel we do well and what I need to leave alone, tell me where my priorities need to be. Something that I didn't really need to add on to my SWOT analysis, because it kind of hit me in the face when I arrived on day one, were the high levels of stress and the low morale of the team in the school. I know that I've got a couple of colleagues here who were in and around the school at the time and will remember those times fondly. It wasn't a bucket of laughs, I can tell you, but it was very important that I address these issues quite quickly. What really struck me were the difficult relationships that were pervasive right across the school. As a team, we had no collegiality. The relationships between team members was tricky and fraught. There was a real distrust between the parent body and the school, and if I'm honest, there was a real them and us in terms of the teaching team, the support team, and the management team. So, and that was my first headship. So, quite a challenging situation to inherit. To be honest, the teaching across the school really was a kind of almost not a primary concern. And I had to prioritise quite quickly that establishing a safe and orderly environment was the number one thing that I had to do. And what really kind of sat heavy with me was the buck now stopped with me. I had the health and safety and the happiness of all of the children, all 350 of them, and the nursery practitioners and nursery kids, and about 50 members of staff, and that sat entirely with me. At some points there were moments where I thought, oh my goodness, do we need to get somebody with a bit more experience here? And I suppose that's where my professional reading came in, and I'll allude to that in a second. So I'm really sorry about the size of the print on the slides, but I'm happy for Alison to share any of them with you. But I just thought I would reuse. Some of you will recognise the kind of format that I've used there. It was my professional learning poster that I created while I was in Cohort 1 of In Headship. And that kind of told the story of my school and what I did. There was a real culture of disengagement, low expectations, lack of collegiality, and the relationships as a tool to move that forward were not there. So that is exactly where I started. Prioritised three key areas. The critical steps that Andrew was talking about for me were to establish a safe and orderly environment, create an inviting learning environment, and to prioritise trust and relationships, and that's where I started. For me to know whether I was making progress with that, what I did was it was not very technologically minded. It was a staff list, and I ranked the staff in terms of who I thought were with me, who were on the bench, and who I was essentially really struggling to get on board, and that's where I started in terms of trying to get to that tipping point where I had more staff with me than against me. We created opportunities in school structures to support collaboration and to support that, so the staff did not plan collegiately, they did not plan collaboratively. So that was the kind of things that we put in place to help drive the school forward. I found myself sitting of a night with my tissues and my cup of tea, or maybe it was something a bit stronger, reading journals about dysfunctional teams and how to pull that together, and all of that information helped me build a professional confidence, if I'm honest, that I was actually getting things right, because as a new head teacher, you do have that anxiety, that imposter syndrome that I'm new to this, do I have the experience to be able to carry this off, if I'm honest? But I think what really helped was that the professional reading helped me know that I was using research-based approaches, tried and tested approaches, and that I was on the right line, and I needed to stick with that. I always kept coming back to my professional reading as a source of comfort, and also to help me get the confidence that I needed to continue. So eventually we did get there. I lost a few staff on the way, if I'm honest, and at one point I did have a tearful conversation with my head of education to say, you need someone a bit more experienced in this role, I don't think I can do this. And the advice she gave me was, stick to your guns, you're doing the right thing. If staff go, I'll restaff your school, and off you go. And do you know what? She was absolutely right, and that's what did happen. We eventually got to the point where we had a calmer environment, and we could take a look at some learning and teaching, which was nice. And some of the texts that really help were down in the acknowledgements there. One of them was Lizotte and Snyder, which is what effective schools do. If you haven't read that, it's an old one, but it's a good one. If it's something you've read as a aspiring new head teacher, I read it actually as a deputy at Crieff Primary School, and it was a book that Emmett gave me. It's a really, really good book, dead easy to read, and it really gives you the tenets of what is required to have an effective school. And I would really, really encourage you to get that one. If you'll get it very cheap on Amazon as a second-hand one. So it was reading those kind of texts, the full-in text about how to manage change effectively, and what that then led us to, and I was a good 18 months into post, was then establishing visions, values and aims. It was quite a long time when I was in post before we did that. I think the timing of that was the right timing, because I think if I had, as a new head teacher, started to establish visions, values and aims, I actually don't know what we would have ended up with, to be honest, in that first kind of 6 to 12 months. But by the time we were 18 months in, we really had a sense of the ambition for the school and where we wanted to be. And what we came up with was the Downfield Promise, which 8 years in now, and I was inspected 4 weeks ago, and the inspectorate, I can't tell you too much because my report is not in the public domain, but they liked visions, values and aims, and I'd said, should I review that now that we're almost kind of 6 years in with that, and they said, no, leave it well alone. It's doing the purpose that it needs. You might just want to relaunch, but leave it as it is. So it's still successful and does what it says in the tin. So my tips in terms of what worked: professional reading, absolutely. Establishing a safe orderly environment. Creating that culture of professional learning through professional reading, and through my love of professional learning and professional reading was key. Increasing opportunities for leadership across the team, and really identifying your stars and your little your stars that can support some of that learning. That was not easy in itself in the school that I was in at the time. There was a lot of, you're defecting to the dark side, when staff were wanting to put their head above the parapet and get involved in things. And as a member of the team, that's a hard thing to fight against. But again, we got there, which was really positive. And through that contractual vision, the Downfield Promise that all stakeholders were involved in, the Downfield Promise was basically a promise that all the stakeholders, this is what we're in this to do, this is what we're all about, and it's a promise to each other that we're going to help each other do this. And I think that style of visions, values and aims for the schools that we were leading at the time was exactly the right approach. The next slide, again, is very small text, and I apologise for that, but it was my top tips. And the first one, unsurprisingly, is read. If there's anything that I learn as a deputy and as a new head teacher, reading can get you out of some dark places and will always be there and help you. Be yourself and that authentic leadership. I learned from two great leaders. And if I'm honest, I probably emulated their style and their way of doing things to begin with, but I gradually assimilated that and became Mrs. Emmett, and not a carbon copy of Mrs. Beaton or Mrs. DL, but I think you take the good bits from all your experiences as you go and come up with something that's truly authentic to yourself. Gillian's talked a lot about the emails and how they can suck you into a black hole in your office. Nobody wants you to be, and nobody will give you any sympathy for the amount of emails you've got in your inbox, by the way. So yeah, be yourself, be out and about, lead by being seen. And something that really helped in terms of gaining trust of my team was establishing an all-blame culture, and I can't emphasise that enough. I took the blame for many a thing that wasn't my fault. And that brought me a lot of kudos with my team, I have to say. There were also moments where staff burst into my office to tell me what they'd done or something that had blown up. And as much as it was hard to bite my tongue and say, oh my God, why did you do that? But saying, do you know what? Thank you for telling me, because if I know I can help, sit down. That doesn't make you a bad person. Let's figure out how we fix this together. The people that were sitting on the bench and sitting on the wall and not sure which way they were going, those kind of conversations were the ones that tipped things in my favour eventually. The get out more was the management by working around, which was don't focus on the emails too much. And finally, love the ones you're with. I had a very diverse, varied staff. I had a very unionised staff, so that was a laugh. But be brave enough to have those tricky conversations, which I did. I had some code of professionalism and conduct conversations behind closed doors, but I really invested in the staff that I had. Some of them chose to leave, and that was okay. Don't take it personally. But the team that I have now are amazing, and I don't want to say too much about my recent inspection, but what I will say is the comments from the inspectorate colleagues before they left was, you have an amazing feel in your school, there's a really positive culture and ethos, your staff were very open, and they're up for leading things. So for me, hey, that was a wee win. So I'm happy to share the slides if anybody wants them, because I realise that people at the back won't be able to see them, but I hope you found a few of my observations and my journey useful. Thank you.